What's up guys, welcome back to another episode of GripWorks. As you can see behind me, we are in a completely different place right now. We are actually in my dad's studio and he has his own YouTube channel which he films here in the studio, and he's actually working on something very special for the Civic. It's sitting over there next to the camera. I can't show you guys that yet, it's coming in a later video, but for right now I have the Civic's transmission sitting on the table in front of me. So let me get you guys caught up on why we're here and why the Civic's transmission is on the table. So in the last video that I uploaded, you guys would have seen that I swapped a B20 into the Civic at the workspace that you guys have come to know. That workspace was at my job, and I was fortunate enough to be able to have that space to work on the cars, to film these videos, and you know, things were going really great for a while. Still a little slow because I didn't have that much time, but at least I had somewhere to put the two cars and all my parts and have enough space to make these videos. But one thing I didn't show you guys when I was doing the whole swap process was I was actually moving out at the same time, and that is because the company I used to work for lost its building due to various reasons, mainly being the pandemic and how it affected the event industry, which is what I worked in. We were kind of out of luck and we had to move out of that building, which meant that I lost the workspace and I had to get my two cars out of there. Now I wanted to get the Civic's engine swap done while I still had the space, so that is what you guys saw in the last video. But behind the scenes, Lewis and I were starting to pack up everything, and I had to move the Mustang out of there, get it on a trailer, and get it to a storage unit, unfortunately, and I had to get all of my parts and stuff and put it in the storage unit. At least those parts are safe, but now I don't have a place to work, which is kind of why the videos have slowed down quite a bit, is because I no longer have a space to work. Now, some of you guys might have seen a couple years back during the lockdown that I actually built the car originally in a tiny little carport, half a carport technically, at the house. And I can still work on the car there, but it's very limiting, especially with the size of the camera rig that I have now. It takes up a lot of space. So what I did is I pulled the transmission out, and the reason why I did that is because I bought the transmission used on OfferUp. And you know, I've had good luck in the past buying stuff used on either Facebook Marketplace or OfferUp or Craigslist or whatever. And the guy I bought this transmission from swore up and down that this transmission was good. So as you guys saw in the last video, you know, we got the car done and I drove it out with this transmission, but we were kind of in a rush because we were in the middle of moving out of the building. So Lewis and I just kind of did whatever we could just to get the car running and driving, and so that I can drive it home. And on that drive home, I noticed that I couldn't get the car into fourth gear or fifth gear, like whatsoever. Fourth gear had a nasty grind, and fifth gear I was just completely locked out. Backtracking even further, when we went to Vita Club with David's EG hatch, we had a similar problem where the car wouldn't go into certain gears, and we thought it was strange. We actually opened that transmission up in that video a long time ago, couldn't find anything wrong. We put it back together, put it in the car. I guess after driving the car for a little while, and maybe the transmission oil kind of lubricating things a little better, who knows, but it kind of started like just loosening up and going into gear normally. And after driving the car for a few hundred miles while we were doing the clutch break-in, the transmission started feeling great in that car. So when I drove my car home that night, I was like, hey, I can't get into fourth or fifth gear, but no problem. It's probably just something similar to what happened to David's EG hatch. But that day never came. I took the car out a few times since then off camera, and it has gotten probably worse. The transmission acts very strange. It's very hard to describe. It's like super easy to stall. That might be partly because of the tune, but it'll do a lot of other weird things, like, and this is gonna sound pretty strange, but you put the car into first gear, take it out of first gear, put it right back where it was, and now you're in third. Which is, I don't know, it's the weirdest thing ever, but I took the transmission out of the car and I brought it here to my dad's studio because luckily he let me use the space for a little while to do this. And I'm gonna be splitting the transmission case and kind of doing a visual inspection and seeing if I can find out what's wrong with it, and maybe I can even attempt to fix this transmission myself. I would love to have the knowledge and the experience to be able to crack this thing open and modify gear sets and swap to an LSD someday and change the final drive. And I would like to have that knowledge, and the transmission takes like little to no time to remove from the car. So and not only that, but I'll be saving a lot of money by doing this myself rather than taking it out to a shop and having it rebuilt professionally, which would be great. I just don't have the budget for that right now. Transmissions, B-series transmissions especially, have been skyrocketing in price. It's insane. Like, you used to be able to get LS transmissions like this for like 150, 200 bucks. And now these things are going for like close to 1,000. It's just insane. So I studied up a little bit and I watched HondaStreet Garage's video. I'll link it down below on how to, well, the beginning of the video is how to split the case. So I used that as a guide. So shout out HondaStreet Garage. I'm gonna go ahead and take this case apart and see if I can find out what is wrong with this transmission. So what Mark at HSG said is I have to crack open this little plug here. There's a couple of bolts here that hold the detent springs. A bolt over here that holds the reverse gear, and then the case bolts that go all the way around. After that, I have to crack the case seal, which is like the Honda bond that's around it. Then there is a clip I have to undo up here, and then I can take the case off. So I'm gonna go ahead and start with that. And I'm very, very curious to see what's going on inside of this thing. Jesus Christ. This thing is completely covered in silicone. There we go. Okay, so now I'm gonna go ahead and try to find any obvious issues. I'm looking for like broken gears or selector rings. There is silicone all over the inside of this thing. I don't see anything wrong. I mean, like, maybe this gear here has a little bit of wear on the teeth. I'm not sure which gear this is. The magnet that's in here that collects like you know, metal shards has stuff on it, but it's like nothing out of the ordinary. There's some rust on some of these parts, kind of like if this thing was like left open for a long time. Now I do know that this case did suffer some damage. Specifically, I think it was in this area here, because it is welded. Not sure you guys can see that, but something happened to the transmission in this area. It's welded here and it's welded on the other side of the case. This is not what I wanted to see. I wanted to see something, you know, very obvious, and, you know, hopefully have it be a simple kind of, you know, repair and replace kind of situation, but I'm not seeing anything crazy. Like, even all the synchros look nice. Yeah, I don't see anything apparently wrong with this thing. Everything appears to be okay. I'm gonna go ahead and cut the camera here, and I'm gonna try to, you know, look up some reference photos and see if I can find something out. I will pick this back up when I figure something out. Oh, crap. Okay, I'm starting to believe that it's the case that's the issue, especially after removing the shift selector mechanism. I think that's what it's called. Nothing seems wrong with it per se, but the bosses where it mounts to are, one of them is very damaged. I'll show you guys right now. It is booger welded on there. Yeah, this case exploded. I don't know if it bottomed out super hard on something or if it was in a like very high horsepower car, but this thing is like messed up. Like this fork wouldn't want to move before. This is fifth in reverse, and I couldn't get it into fifth gear before. That's reverse, that's fifth. None of the gears themselves are damaged, really. The top of this gear looks a little nicked, but Yeah, reverse looks a little messed up, but I'm starting to think that it's the case, especially when you guys start to see how much weld there is. I'm gonna go ahead and reconfigure the camera setup so that I can hold the camera handheld and show you guys like how messed up some of this stuff is. Like there's weld everywhere. Not very good welds either. Okay, so as you guys can see, this is one of the standoffs where the shift selector bolts to. There's 3 of them. There's one here, there's one back here, and there's one here. This one appears to have broken off completely in the past. Not only that, but like the boss itself, it has a crack down the middle. This thing like completely split up. And these guys just completely booger weld this thing on. Plus, there's weld all back here, in this area here. And this side of the transmission case isn't that bad. The other side is much worse. Okay, so the other side of the case is a lot worse. As you guys can see, there's weld here in this area. There's a big bead here, and then this thing is welded all the way up here. And it stops about here. So all of this, here, here, and then the other side of the case would be in this area, which is where it has the damage to the outside of the case, plus the damage to the threaded boss where the shift selector mechanism, whatever you call it, is bolted to. So here's my theory. Okay, so I had to switch my mindset here a little bit. I was a little concerned at first when, first opening this case up, because I couldn't see anything inherently wrong with the gear set, the final drive, the main shaft or counter shaft, the shift fork, the shift selector mechanism, whatever you call this thing. I didn't see anything wrong with anything, right? So I was just like, well, then what am I gonna do? Now, I came into this knowing that the case had some damage. You can see the welds from the outside, but once I saw the inside of the case cover, or whatever you would call this half, like as you guys saw, like whatever happened to this transmission was pretty gnarly. Like either it bottomed out on something very badly, like on a stance car at a high speed, maybe it hit something on the freeway, or it was on a very high horsepower car and it just grenaded the transmission, blowing a huge hole in the case in the process. And my theory is stack tolerances. Whenever they decided to repair the casing of the transmission, they did weld it back together and it did bolt back together. But you'll never get the gaps the same, as in like the seams where the parts weld together. I don't think you can ever get them the same. They're going to be, the transmission is going to change in shape a little bit, and now it's welded together. Now, it is very important that everything is completely straight as it came from the factory, because these shift forks here, the bearings and all of that have to align with the inside of this case here. If this whole section of the case is off, then I'm thinking when you bolt it on, it's not gonna sit perfectly perpendicular to the mating surface of this half, if that makes sense. So the top half is gonna be just ever so slightly off in some kind of direction. At least that is my theory. And what that's going to do is it's going to cause friction or binding in some of these components. Bearings probably wouldn't be too bad, but the shift selector forks here, these guys most definitely are going to have some kind of an issue. And that became a little more apparent when I removed the shift selector, because after I removed it, I was able to move, this guy freely, and when it was together I couldn't move it at all. Not only that, but the boss where this bolts to is completely booger welded as well. So if this guy is sitting crooked in the case, plus the case itself is crooked, then things are going to start binding up and it's going to be very difficult to get the transmission into gear and whatnot. So I don't really know why it was grinding in fourth. I need to do some research and figure out which synchro is fourth gear, which gear is fourth gear. But as far as me like struggling to get it into gear in general, plus not being able to get it into fifth at all, which is this guy here, I'm starting to think that I need a new case. Now, I know some of you might say, well, why don't you just get a new transmission and call it a day? Well, unfortunately, I just don't have that kind of budget right now. The best that I can do in this situation is try to hunt down a bare case on eBay and then try to transfer my diff, gear set, the forks, just transfer everything over to the new transmission case and put it back together and give it another shot. I mean, this thing was leaking, which is probably another attribute to the whole case being crooked, mating surfaces not lining up anymore. Now there's gaps and whatnot. Plus they might have just not welded the thing properly in the first place, so there's transmission fluid seeping through it. The leak wasn't horrible, but it was enough to be annoying. Being that the Civic it's supposed to be my year-round track car, like the kind of car that's like, you know, ready to go at all times, I think my best bet is going to be to try to find another transmission case. That is like probably my only option right now. These B-Series transmissions are just becoming stupid expensive, and I'm sure I can try to find a case on eBay for a couple $100. I've seen them on there. I know I've seen them on eBay for just a couple $100, and I'm pretty sure I can get everything out of this one and into the new one without needing a press. I do have a press, but I'm pretty sure I can just unbolt and transfer over. So I'm going to pick this video back up at some point in the future when I have some sort of solution, and hopefully I can find a case and get this thing put back together and back in the car and get the car back on the track, because right now it's just sitting on jack stands and it's bugging the hell out of me. So I will see you guys at some point.